This morning, before I opened my Bible, I prayed and asked God what he wanted me to read. And what came to me was the book of Hosea. And I was a little like, well, why Hosea? I'd read it before, but I've honestly forgotten what it was about. So I cracked open my Bible, and the version of the Bible that I read is the New Living Translation, which I thought I had a copy here. No. But at the beginning of each book of the Bible, it has a little blurb on who the book was written by, when it was written, what was the context surrounding that time period, etc. And then it gives like a little summary. So I was quickly rereading that, and it talks about how Hosea, the book of Hosea, is a love story between Hosea and his wife, Gomer, I think it was. Anyway, they had a couple of kids, and then she cheated on him. And the book was basically paralleling that this is how God feels about us sometimes, that we cheat on him when we have false idols, when we lose sight of him, when we don't yield to him, etc. And Hosea was a prophet, and he was supposed to go to, I think it was the tribe of Judah, and warn them to get back right with God, and that there's natural consequences if you don't. And immediately when I read that, it made me think of a friend of mine. When I was a kid, I grew up in Florida, and this friend of mine and I used to always get in a lot of trouble together. And he was always pushing the envelopes, especially athletically. He was an incredible athlete, and he would always do these things on his trampoline, triple flips, this, that, or whatever, but he'd always break a bone or hurt himself. He was skateboarding, and he'd get into an accident. So I remember he was always in a cast, it seemed like, when we were growing up. And this one time we were in his backyard, and we were smashing rocks, because that's what you did before the internet, I guess. And he had this hammer, and he's smashing rock like this. We were probably 6 or 7 years old. And his mom saw this happening. She comes out on the back porch, and she's like, "Hey, knock it off." He didn't even stop. He didn't even hear her. And then she was like, "Hey," and she said his name. "I'm telling you, stop it." And he stops, and he looks at her, and he said the one thing that you never say. And he goes, "Mom, one more." And he goes like this with the hammer, and in the backswing, the back of the hammer just smacked the back of his head. And this, I'll never forget, because I was a little bit behind him. His bleach blonde hair, just this bright red pool of blood, started to spread over his whole head. And the most impressive part of this whole story was his mom's reaction, or I should say her non-reaction, because of course he burst into tears, went running right over to his mom, and she kind of had this, eye roll like, "Hey bud, like I told you, that's why you don't do that." But of course she hugged him and reassured him and let him know, like, this is why you shouldn't be doing that, because it can be dangerous. And it just immediately made me think of, that's our relationship with God. Like God doesn't do harm to us, but he allows for natural consequences to help get us back on track, especially if he's trying to talk to you and you're not listening, or if you're doing something that is unrighteous. There's going to be a correction. And I think the world is going through a massive correction right now, where we're being called back to God. And sometimes that feels very uncomfortable. It can feel what we would call very violent. And it's like, why would God do this to us? It's not that he's doing it to us. It's that there are natural consequences from straying from your parents' guidance and their protection. So anyway, that's what came to me this morning, and I hope that helps you out in some way. Peace.